there's a lot to this story. There's a story reported by Matthew Cole, Richard Esposito, Sam Biddle, Ryan Grimm. All of them are of the Intercept. Ryan Grimm also works with the Young Turks. Top secret NSA report details Russian hacking efforts days before the 2016 election. We discussed it briefly on yesterday. I want to give you a few more details on it and discuss the implications of Reality Winner being arrested potentially as a result of actions taken by the Intercept. So according to a top secret NSA report, the NSA believes that Russia military intelligence executed a cyber attack on at least one U.S. voting supplier and sent a spear phishing email to more than 100 local election officials just days before the last November's presidential election. This is directly from the Intercept. What the report does not show is the underlying or raw intelligence, but it's the analysis based on the raw intelligence. So as Reality Winner gathered this information, she was not able to get access to the raw data to back this up. This is the analysis and the conclusion of the NSA. From the report itself, Russian General Staff Main Intelligence Directorate actors executed cyber espionage operations against a named U.S. company in August 2016, evidently to obtain information on elections related to software and hardware solutions. The actors likely used data obtained from that operation to launch a voter registration themed spear phishing campaign targeting U.S. local government organizations. What the Intercept was clear on is that this top secret document made no conclusions as to whether it had any effect on the outcome of the election. So there are things that we can draw from this, and there are things that we cannot draw from this. But the assessment itself, according to the Intercept, concluded with high confidence that the Kremlin ordered an extensive, multi-pronged propaganda effort to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. Now, on the backside of that story, or on the flip side of that story, you have the NSA, or federal authorities, announcing on yesterday that they had already arrested Reality Winner and tied her directly to the Intercept story. It was almost like simultaneous, right? On the one hand, the Intercept released their story, and then on the very next thing that happened, NBC reports that someone was in custody concerning the same exact story. It appears as though Reality Winner, who's the NSA contractor, 25-year-old from Augusta, Georgia, it appears as though she did not cover her tracks well, but there's a possibility that the Intercept did not do her any favors in terms of protecting her identity, particularly in a fashion that people like me would not have been aware of, but people who do this professionally should have known. Whether or not a photocopied version of a document reveals the dot matrix somewhat, I guess it's like your metadata information, similar to metadata information, that the NSA was able to look at the document itself and ascertain what printer it came from. Now, I would not know that the NSA was able to do that, but people who do this all day, every day, this is something that you would expect them to know. That was a piece of the puzzle that the NSA needed and federal authorities needed to arrest, to find the individual, Reality Winner, and arrest her. According to a lot of sources, according to Washington Post has an article on it. There is a post out of course, the Intercept is speaking out on it little by little, but there were a lot of things that they could not have done to protect her. One, because they didn't know who she was, but then two, there were things that she did on her end of the table that actually led them more conclusively to her, emailing the Intercept directly from her work computer. printing this out on her work computer. There's a lot of things that happened ultimately leading to her arrest. Now, who holds responsibility for it? At this point, that's up to their lawyers to decide. What I'm interested in is two things: the information that was released and the arguments around it right now. Because we've said time and time and again that it doesn't matter how the information comes out. We said this with regard to the DNC leaks, to the Podesta emails. Doesn't matter how it came out. What matters is what's in it. What's the substance of it? And this article suggests that the NSA has a high level of confidence that Russia did involve themselves in our election. What it does not say is that Russia affected the outcome of the election. But we are in a weird place, and I guess maybe it's weird for me and not everyone else, but it's a weird place where I'm starting to realize more and more that people have their preferred narrative that they're going to hang on to no matter what evidence comes out. I have seen people turn coat on the outlets like the Intercept, because now the Intercept is putting out information that contradicts their perspective on Russia. It's almost as though you have a group of people who, no matter what evidence is shown, they will not believe under any circumstances that Russia had any involvement in the 2016 election. And to me, that seems to be the most I don't want to be insulting. What's the word? The most naive. That has to be the most naive perspective possible, because the baseline position of any major power in the world is to have influence over other nations in their elections, in their day-to-day, in their media, in their every aspect of a nation's existence. Competing nations intervene all the time. And so this starting position worldview of it wasn't Russia, Russia didn't have anything to do with it, to me seems to be naive. And that's being generous, right? Because we've seen, and I don't want to use a cliche where there's smoke, there's fire, but the reality of it is that the sum total of the pieces suggests that Russia did get involved in our election. Did they turn the results? I still don't believe they turned the results, and that's just a belief. I don't have any evidence to suggest one way or the other. I just don't think that they had an impact enough to actually change the outcome. Does this absolve Hillary Clinton of running a piss poor campaign? No, but I don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction to dismiss evidence that shows Russia was involved. I don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction to reject that, because Democrats are weaponizing it to say this is why they lost. It's a perfect example why we have to be ambidextrous enough to do both and. We have to use both hands at both times. We have to admit and see the writings on the wall, and to, at a minimum, allow the conversation and, more importantly, the investigation to occur into Russian meddling into the 2016 election. But you have people who push back against an investigation. And the best way for us to resolve this once and for all is to have a damn investigation. And so what puts me in the weird position that I mentioned previous is the fact that the more information and evidence that comes out, the more people whose default position is, no, this is just a conspiracy theory. It's not Russia. It never was Russia. It's just the Democratic Party not want to be irresponsible. The more evidence that comes out, the more they're having to turn on organizations that put the information out. And so now the Intercept works for the government. That's the newest line. This is the newest line by some independent media, people in my space, in my world. That somehow or another, this means that the Intercept has been co-opted and they are complicit with the federal government putting out a narrative. So at what point, I mean, there is no point. And I think that is the point. There is no point for a certain group of progressives that will accept any evidence at all, because they have a vested interest in protecting their turf. And their turf says it's never Russia, it's always the Democratic Party. And the reality is showing us that, yes, it is the Democratic Party, but in this case, Russia actually was involved in our election. To the extent that we need to go to war with Russia, no. But anyone reasonable would never suggest that. And anyone unreasonable who is suggesting that, they need to be called on the carpet for it. I guess the problem is, here's the problem that I'm having, is that it's difficult to be a reasonable observer in an unreasonable time where you have half of the left-leaning perspective in America shouting that it was nothing but the Russians and that's the only reason they lost. And then the other half saying the Russians couldn't possibly have done anything because America is really the bad guy in everything. Unreasonable times, and here I am just trying to be reasonable and say, can we just have a damn investigation, a thorough investigation, and whatever it says, and whatever it doesn't say, it does not say.